Hi, my name is Soraya Shumpert. I am with Indiana Wesleyan University, and today I will be discussing how to market to the I generation. They're also referred to as Gen Zs, so you might hear me refer to them as that during this video. And let's get started. So the first topic we'll be discussing is how the I generation uses and consumes electronic media. So for this topic, you'd want to kind of know what interests this generation. They have access to a lot of electronic media, and this is mostly because they grew up in an era where they don't know a life without phones or computers. Because of this, you want to make sure that you have a digital space to reach this audience. Now, 61% of children ages 8 to 17 have a TV in their room. So you definitely want to make sure that you have a TV presence, whether it's a commercial or a brand that's tied to a TV show, something that will get your name out there and some screen time for the individuals within this generation. There's also 35% of the generation that utilizes video games. If you can find a way to partner with a company or with this video game character to add to your products, that might also draw in some purchases. A lot of times there are characters that are used on toothbrushes or body wash or clothing. If there is a way that you can kind of partner and get some trademarks in there, so that way you have exposure to your company or brand. 14% of this generation has a DVD player. It's not too high, so you probably wouldn't want to have a market space in a DVD setting, whether that's like in the previews or if there's something that you can add to a DVD as far as like an incentive for your company. You probably wouldn't reach too many individuals for the I generation. I believe this is simply because we are now moving more to a streaming service. So if it's Hulu or Netflix or Disney Plus, a lot of this generation doesn't have a physical DVD. So you might want to steer clear from, spending a lot of time and effort on advertising that way. Now, with this generation, if it has to do with toys, they are more hands-off when it comes to physical toys. And again, this is because of the digital age that they have grown accustomed to. So if you've noticed, there are a lot of toys out now that are incorporating an iPhone or an iPad. If there's a drone that is app controlled, a lot of times they'll be able to just fly it with their phone. And that being said, if you have a toy or some sort of product that is in that market space, you just want to make sure that it's app accessible and that there is some sort of interest that is more than just a physical toy. They are more intrigued with something that involves their phone or computer, simply because that's what they use every day. Now, with the I generation, like I said, they're also referred to as Gen Z. So with them, they are not as concerned with the environment. So if your company is focused on saving water, or if it's animal friendly or it's tree friendly, plant-based, that might not be something that really appeals to this generation. And that's simply because they're more on a needs basis. If they need it or if they want it, then they will go ahead and obtain it somehow. So you won't want to spend too much time on advertising the benefits that it has to the environment, and more just focusing on what features it has for them to use in the future. Moving on to our next topic, how is Gen Z different from the millennial generation when it comes to electronic media? Well, a lot of times you'll see similarities between both generations, and this is simply because the Gen Z population is mostly children of millennials. So they kind of take after their parents in terms of how they purchase and use items that have electronic content. So they didn't start off with a life like millennials. Millennials kind of had the best of both worlds, where they didn't have computers in the beginning, and then they were kind of raised into that generation. Whereas the Gen Z population simply started off with smartphones and computers. So both are digital, both are digitally savvy, but the millennial generation ranges between 19 and 35, whereas the Gen Z is 11 to 18. So their interests are going to be different because they don't have the same interests based on age. So if you're trying to kind of bring them in, you want to make sure that you are selling or offering a product that appeals to ages 11 to 18. So if there's a product that might work for both millennials and Gen Z, you'd want to kind of break it down differently to advertise the features on both sides, simply to show them that it's more than a product that might be for older individuals and that it can be appealing to a younger audience. Now, Gen Z prefers to be influenced with marketing. They are really big users of YouTube, and they look for people who blog or review products prior to purchasing. So if you have a way of incorporating a famous athlete or singer or actor to help market your products, that might be a good avenue to take, simply because they are very interested in how others feel about using a product. And millennials, not so much. They might take some reviews into mind, but they are not as strongly convinced of using products based on others' opinions, especially if it comes to more famous people. Now, millennials shop online more than Gen Z. 74% of millennials make their purchases online, whereas there's 45% of Gen Z that uses it. And that's simply because of their age range. So, like I stated earlier, Gen Z is ages 11 to 18. And with that, most of their parents are probably making their purchases, which would explain why the millennial number is so much higher. Because again, they are the parents of this generation. So they'll be doing the bulk of the spending, which in turn makes up the number of the 74%. So you're wanting to make sure that your product is accessible online, because a lot of times they're busy and they don't want to have to physically go in a store and find out that it's out of stock. It's just easier to log online, click it, add it to the cart, and then purchase it for it to be delivered to their home. Gen Z uses more digital platforms than the millennial generation. Again, this is in part because they have been born into this generation. Sometimes they'll have about 5 screens open at once, and they're really good at multitasking between media. Whereas millennial generation, they're more 3 or less apps. And that's just because they're utilizing the internet and digital content, but not as much, simply because they've used most of the media that's available, whether it's magazines or newspapers, just good old-fashioned word of mouth. And this Gen Z generation, they are used to doing everything online. So that's where most of their attention is given. Millennials have brand loyalty to products. So if there's something that they were happy with and the company releases a new product, they're more apt to buy it, versus Gen Z, where they want an item that they can use regardless of the brand. So they're not concerned with the name, they're more concerned with how it can be used and beneficial to them. So if you're wanting to market your product to Gen Z, just make sure you are speaking directly to them about how this benefits them. And if it's millennial generation and it's a brand, just make sure that you always, keep that name top of mind within your advertising. And the last topic that we will be discussing has to do with the best way to target the I generation, or Gen Z. So with this, like I stated, we need to be digitally present. It's very important that you have some sort of platform, whether it's an app or your advertising is done physically online, so that they have a banner going across the screen, or if there is a clickable ad where they can learn more. That's definitely something you'd want to invest in, simply because they're going to see it online versus in person. You want to focus on their needs and wants versus the brand loyalty. So again, like if it's Nike or Apple, they're not going to flock to it right away. They need to know that this is something that they can utilize. So with that in mind, focus on your features. So this brand or this item will do X, Y, and Z. And that will draw them in more, simply because they'll see how it can help them or how they'll be able to use it. Now, you also want to make it personal. You want to reach out to them as much as possible, whether it's an email, whether you have a notification pop up on an app. If there's something that you can personalize, like even if it's a postcard, I'm not sure if that would be the best route to go, but something that is specific to them. Just make it, custom to their needs. And that way they'll be like, okay, this is something that I'm interested in. Let's go ahead and see what they're about. And also just using multiple touch points to reach them. I mentioned earlier that there's probably about 5 different applications or screens that the iGeneration will use at one time. So don't just stick yourself in a hole to say that we've already put ourselves online one time. What about 2, 3, or 4 times? As much as you can, reach out to a digital platform, and making sure that you reach them is key here. And then the last thing that you'd want to keep in mind is that their parents are millennials, most of them anyway, and they share similar traits. So if you want to reach out to millennials and Gen Z at the same time, just make sure that you are tailoring the conversation or advertisements to their needs and specifically to what appeals to them. Remember, they're age 11 to 18, so they're younger adults and they aren't as available to shop online just yet. So if it's something that interests them, they can convince their parents to purchase it for them. But if you're able to also reach their parents in a different way, that is something that can appeal to them, and then they'll be more convinced to purchase it. Keeping all of that in mind, I hope that this helps you with reaching the iGeneration or Gen Z, and good luck with your endeavors in the future for your business.